couple of years, it seems like. There's a new report, and I know that I've covered them and we've talked about them, where the IMF will release some internal audit, and it will say, look,
this one, okay?
actually the promised benefits of austerity and everything goes with it, from privatization, slashing public services, the economic benefits have been overblown, and then sort of by implication we need to adopt a more coherent and more sort of broad-based integrated development strategy. And if you're anywhere outside of the halls of the IMF or World Bank, this is really obvious from examples as diverse as Russia, Bolivia, and everywhere else imaginable, that austerity policies driven by the bank from the 80s through the 90s through the modern era have done what you'd expect them to do on their face. If you cut public services and you open up a favorable environment for foreign capital, essentially you produce outcomes you would expect. There is, maybe in cases of extreme poverty, there is some new jobs, some new growth rates, because you're starting with so little. But of course the growth is incredibly lopsided, it's environmentally damaging, and it embeds and recreates and perpetuates serious social problems. So this is a piece from the website africaisacountry.com, and it's a very good...
He's talking about, take example Africa, but this is a failed case.
A site on African issues. And this is a piece by Maria Hegelveld, and she starts by quoting, talking about all of these recent reports on whether neoliberalism has been oversold, and some of the IMF's own sort of admitting of the problems in austerity policies. And she said, and she even quotes from an IMF essay which is titled, quote unquote, "Neoliberalism Oversold." And she says, now I'm quoting from Hengelfeld, the title, that while the IMF essay titled "Neoliberalism Gives One Hope," that neoliberalism oversold gives one hope that the IMF is finally coming around to the position that its policies have caused a lot of damage across the world, and perhaps the fund will be more cautious this time around, and it intervenes in resolving the nascent debt crisis in Africa. So she says that this is an apology, but it's awfully late and weak, and goes on to sort of talk about some current policies being promoted across the sub-Saharan Africa and the subcontinent, even after these acknowledgments. And I'm going to quote again from her piece. Across sub-Saharan Africa, the main adjustment measures that are implemented and considered for the next few years are subsidy reforms and wage bill cuts and caps, followed by an increase in consumption taxes and other welfare cuts. So consumption taxes mean, as an example, let's be really clear about this, whatever your staple grain or meal or food is, say it's corn, say it's, any basic food staple, millet, your taxes are going up while you're cutting services and increasing the costs of most every type of important basic necessity. So basically, the IMF, despite its own castigation of itself for promoting these unjust and failed policies, is continuing them in Africa. Quote again from the article. The notion that there's no money for safety nets, decent jobs, quality education, healthcare is simply a myth. Just by tackling illicit financial activities of transnational corporations and rich individuals alone, Africa could win back about $50 billion a year. That's why, in addition to debt restructuring, the authors, who she's quoting, seek progressive tax reforms is more effective than a just approach than austerity. Same dynamic, by the way, in Greece.
Hello, you. I'm Sam Cedar. Looking for smart progressive talk that is occasionally amusing? Well, subscribe to our YouTube feed. Subscribe to our podcast. Like us on Facebook.
So this one, Greek Prime Minister Alex Tsipras and his Syriza party came to power from January 2015 by riding a wave of anti-austerity sentiment. The people of Greece have good reason to be sore on such policies, since activating an initial round of austerity measures 5 years ago. GDP has fallen nearly 30%. From 2011, 45% actually fallen 30%, and unemployment level is hover around 26%, and nearly 1/3 of Greeks live below the poverty line. 1/3 of Greeks, just you showed video, live below the poverty line. What's more, youth unemployment has soared beyond 50%, and many talented young people are leaving the country. Right, this is a summary. And second one is talking about Spain. Spain's unemployment rate, for example, remained high at 22%, but it's down from about 27% during the current cycle. So Spain is very improving. And this is Greece. Fiscal austerity has been very counterproductive for the Greek economy, and it should be put on hold until the economy is clearly in self-sustaining economic expansion, says Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analyst. So he is talking about it's self-sustaining economic expansion. And they need to, at that time, they need to consider austerity, he said. And that is the Troika, like European Central Bank, European Commission, and the IMF, the Troika, should not push Greece to reduce its cyclically adjusted budget deficit until the country's unemployment rate is falling quickly and consistently. So economy is going to recover, then it should wait until those unemployment rate is recovering. And to stimulate the Greece recovery, less austerity and more fiscal stimulus, there should be a focus on structural reform rather than austerity. Greece should have gotten meaningful debt relief and much more time to balance the deficit. He said, this is August 19. And at the same time, IMF said, those information, okay, they IMF admit that austerity, that they are wrong decision for austerity. So Lagarde, she recommended for European countries their payment for the debt extend for next 2 or 3 decades. It means 2 or 3 decades means until 2040, instead of just short-sighted. But we need to 20 years we need to consider for Greece repayment. So sort of decisions the IMF recommend for the European countries. And this is the conclusion. This year, what they're going to do is, I just read a lot of material this time, and this is their conclusion. Very recently, they decided for this sort of conclusion. And beforehand, the early